and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolute must-have survival guide for navigating one of the most perilous, unforgiving universes out there, the world of Shadow Slave. We're going to break down exactly what happens when humanity is confronted by a mystical, apocalyptic force. And, more importantly, how a person might actually survive it. To really grasp the sheer terror of this world, we kind of have to start at the bottom of the food chain. Meet Sunny. He's a frail, pale young man, always rocking dark circles under his eyes, basically a slum rat from the outskirts of the city. Now, for a rich kid with a powerful legacy, getting infected by this whole magical phenomenon is a massive opportunity. But for someone like Sunny, who literally scrounges for food instead of going to school, it is a terrifying, bleak reality. Just imagine going about your day, right? And suddenly you feel this overwhelming, absolutely inescapable fatigue. You go to sleep, and you simply don't wake up. If you fall asleep and don't wake up, this is the nightmare you are about to face. For Sunny, being chosen by this phenomenon didn't present an opportunity at all. To him, it was basically a death sentence. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the nightmare spell explained. 2. Surviving the first trial. 3. Entering the dream realm. 4. The threat of gates. And finally, trapped on the forgotten shore. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the nightmare spell explained. A function, not a creature. Let's start with the macro-level threat here. So, a few decades ago, the world was just recovering from massive natural disasters when this entirely new disease emerged. Millions of people complained of constant fatigue, eventually plunging into an unnatural slumber they literally couldn't wake up from. So what actually is it? Well, when Sunny first experiences the nightmare spell, he finds himself floating in this endless black void, completely filled with complex nexuses of silver light. It looks like a giant celestial neural network. And people always ask, is it alive? It isn't. And honestly, that's what makes it so terrifying. It's an impartial cosmic function. It doesn't care if you live or die. It simply evaluates, tests, and rewards. Here are the 4 critical mechanics of an aspirant's journey. Step 1 is the initial infection, which leads directly to that unnatural slumber. Step 2 is the first nightmare trial, an illusory test of survival. Survive that and boom, you become a sleeper. Then, in step 3, on the very first winter solstice, your spirit is violently pulled right into the dream realm. And finally, step 4, you have to navigate this incredibly deadly realm to find a human citadel that has a gateway. That's the only way to return to the real world and truly awaken. Section 2, Surviving the First Trial, the Rules of Fairness. Once you fall asleep, you are immediately transported into a trial created by the spell. But these trials are actually historical illusions, perfectly reconstructed replicas of past events pulled from lost history. Sunny, for instance, wakes up shivering and shackled to a slave caravan on a freezing mountain. And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference between the trial and what comes after it. See, the first nightmare is completely bound by the rules of fairness. The spell sets up trials, not executions, meaning the threats actually match your rank. But the dream realm? No way. It has absolutely 0 rules. It's a real, completely open wilderness where a dormant human could theoretically stumble upon a literal godlike monster and just get wiped out in a nanosecond. Now, if you do manage to survive that first nightmare, the rewards are immense. You're officially elevated to a sleeper. Plus, you receive a unique magical aspect that unlocks specific powers and attributes, and you earn memories, which are essentially powerful magical items or weapons. Sunny barely survived an encounter with a towering monstrosity known as the Mountain King, but because it was such a massively powerful creature, Sunny was miraculously rewarded with a high-tier memory, the Puppeteer's Shroud. Section 3, Entering the Dream Realm, a dead, magical world. When the first winter solstice rolls around, all surviving sleepers are forcefully drawn right into the dream realm. Now, this isn't some historical illusion anymore. It is a vast, mostly unexplored, and entirely dead world, populated only by nightmare creatures, deeply corrupted ecosystems, and the crumbling ruins of ancient mystic civilizations. To even have a chance of surviving here, you really need to understand the hierarchy of power. Both humans and monsters start at the dormant and awakened stages. But there is a massive, terrifying caveat here. A human has exactly 1 soul core, while nightmare creatures can possess multiple. A lowly beast has 1, sure, but a tyrant has 5. A terror has 6. To even attempt to level the playing field, humans have to violently consume soul shards scavenged directly from the corpses of these very creatures. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the ultimate goal for these sleepers is brutally simple. When they're dropped into this wilderness, their starting location is completely randomized. So the only viable strategy is to band together, survive the onslaught of monsters, and desperately trek to the nearest human citadel. Why? Because these citadels hold gateways. Those are special portals that serve as exit points, allowing them to finally return to reality, evolve their core, and become true awakened. Section 4, the threat of gates, the real-world catastrophe. But what happens if they fail? What if a sleeper doesn't reach a gateway, or is brutally killed out there in the dream realm? Well, this brings us to the devastating real-world consequences, and exactly why global governments are on such high alert all the time. So the crucial point is this. When a person enters their first nightmare, their physical body literally remains right here on Earth. If they die in that trial, their corpse literally transforms into a portal, a gate for nightmare creatures to cross right over into our world. Suddenly, dying in your sleep takes on a genuinely horrifying new meaning. It's actually why Sonny had to surrender himself to heavily armed police custody before falling asleep. If he died peacefully in his sleep, those officers would have to immediately fight off whatever nightmare crawled out of his body. And the sheer scale of this threat really cannot be overstated. Gates have ranks, just like the creatures do. In fact, not long before Sonny was even born, a rank 5 gate opened right here on Earth. To put that into perspective, the overwhelming volume and sheer power of the monsters that poured through that single, solitary portal left an entire continent completely uninhabitable, literally a dead zone. That is the ultimate price of failure. Section 5, Trapped on Forgotten Shore, a Graveyard of Hope. This leads us to our final, terrifying case study. Sometimes incredibly unlucky sleepers are dropped into regions of the dream realm where survival isn't just hard, it's mathematically impossible. Welcome to the Forgotten Shore, a lethal hellscape completely shrouded in darkness, home to the sprawling ruins of the Dark City and a human enclave known as the Bright Castle. Now, you might think finding a human castle out there would be salvation, right? Well, it absolutely isn't. The Bright Castle is a horrifying trap because absolutely no gateway exists there. Hundreds of humans are just completely stranded in this purgatory. The whole place is ruled by Gunlog, the Bright Lord, who struts around in this impenetrable golden armor. He hoards soul shards to strengthen his own elite guards, who then just go out and harvest more shards for him. His tyrannical rule is absolute, and it is completely inescapable. The history of the Forgotten Shores human enclave is basically a tragedy of failed escapes. 15 years ago, the first cohort actually managed to conquer the Bright Castle, but quickly found themselves trapped. The First Lord then led a massive expedition south into the mountains to find a way out. Every single one of them perished. Years later, the Second Lord aimed for a massive structure called the Spire. They were entirely wiped out too. Present day, no one even tries to leave. They just exist, trapped under Gunlong's brutal oppression. Let's move to and see how this builds to the ultimate obstacle. Why was that second expedition completely slaughtered? Well, blocking the single path to the Spire is a creature known as a Fallen Terror. Remember our monster hierarchy from earlier? A Fallen Terror is a whole class above a tyrant. It possesses 6 mighty soul cores, constantly radiating this profane, lethal power. For a group of lowly sleepers, defeating a Fallen Terror isn't just an uphill battle. It is a literal mathematical impossibility. It is absolute suicide to even try. Which leaves us with an incredibly chilling reality. You are stranded in a dark, dead city. The human leader is a ruthless tyrant you can't even scratch, and the only possible path forward is guarded by a 6-cored monstrosity that slaughters all hope. So trapped in a graveyard of hope with absolutely no way out, how do you possibly survive the impossible? Well, it's a giant puzzle that makes this universe endlessly fascinating. Thank you so much for joining this explanator. Until next time, stay awake.